Live from the Clarity from Chaos studios, heard worldwide, it's Dave Campbell. On every episode, Dave and his guests explore, discuss, and work on solutions to some of life's biggest challenges. So, if you're ready, be prepared to be enlightened, amused, and even shocked by what you hear. And now, the real, the authentic, the one and only Dave Campbell.
Welcome back to another edition of Clarity from Chaos. I'm your host, Dave Campbell. As we are all aware, or at least most of us are aware, the effort of President Trump's efforts to immediately remove those criminal, illegal immigrants from our country that were so graciously invited over the last 4 years. However, we also need to be aware of the ongoing effort to stop the president's efforts in the form of activist judges, which, in my estimation, also includes the Supreme Court, as well as the federal court system. To discuss this topic, we're incredibly pleased to welcome back a Mises Institute Associate Scholar and Emeritus Professor of Finance at Ramapo College of New Jersey, Dr. Murray Sabrin. Dr. Sabrin is the author of a recently published memoirs, From Immigrant to Public Intellectual, An American Story. Welcome to the show.
Great to be with you again, Dave. A lot of good things to discuss.
Yeah, a lot of them. So let's start with the batch of activist judges, Doctor. I find it appalling, but I'd like your take on it as well, because I'm not quite sure if it's a concerted effort or if it's just a bunch of rogue judges, if you will.
I think one of the things that we have to put in perspective is, are people who come here illegally entitled to due process? And I think the vast majority of legal scholars would say yes. Anyone who has violated our laws have the right to go in front of a judge or be indicted by a grand jury. With someone who came in here illegally, I think the process could be fairly done quickly, especially if you're a criminal who's been incarcerated in your home country and come here. And however you got here is really remarkable that you came from a prison in another country. How do you wind up in the United States? So again, the process that people have been talking about is due process is one of the cornerstones of American jurisprudence and our legal system. And therefore, people believe that anyone who is caught by ICE or any other law enforcement organization should have, quote, their day in court. And that could be in front of an immigration judge who says, show me your papers of coming here and what's your status in your home country. And that could be done pretty swiftly, I would think, given all the information that we have about people who are coming into the country and finding out what they've done in their home country.
Yeah, I would agree with you. But what I guess troubles me a little bit is the fact that A, they're illegal, and B, they're illegally in this country. So the sovereignty of our Constitution, I don't quite see how that applies to these individuals. If in fact they entered this country illegally and they've done a crime in this country, it would seem to be, and maybe it's something as simple as you stated, an immigration judge that said, nope, you have no standing here. You're out of here, right? You've done an evil deed. See you later, right? But the fact that you have these federal judges issuing injunctions to stop the president from doing something, because to me it should be a simple process, Doctor. It shouldn't be all this complicated, and federal judges, unelected, quite frankly, federal judges shouldn't be dictating policy.
Well, that's I think the debate that we're having in this country is
Right.
it policy or is it jurisprudence? And
Right. Yeah.
the thing that bothers a lot of legal scholars who I respect is if you don't allow due process for non-citizens or illegal aliens, will that carry over to citizens or naturalized citizens? So that's the danger people are saying we face in this country if you're just rounded up in a sweep and you may not be an illegal immigrant, or you may be here illegally and you get deported without due cause. And so that's the thing that's troubling some people who've been writing about this for the past several months, that I think common sense dictates that if someone is a criminal in their home country, they really shouldn't be in the United States, because
Right.
if they've committed a crime here, we want them out of here as quickly as possible or incarcerated here. The point is the American taxpayers are paying enough in taxes. We shouldn't be paying for criminal illegal aliens here in the United States.
Yeah,
So I think I think the common sense approach would be make sure the person that you want to deport should be deported and get them out as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and forgive me, I'm not well versed in the Enemies Alien Act
Yeah.
of what's involved in all of that. But obviously, President Trump has imposed that to use it in his effort to deport these criminals. So I'm not quite sure if that is as simple as vetting somebody that's here illegally and is kind of like, show me your papers. And if you
Yeah.
can't establish your papers, that's number one. Number two, you've got evidence that this guy is performed some heinous deed against the population. It should be something quite simple, it would seem to me. And yeah, go ahead.
Well, the thing is, if they committed a crime in the United States, then you have to go through the whole process of indictment and having a trial and conviction. And then once you have the conviction, do they stay in the U.S. prison or are they deported to their home country? And obviously, the common sense approach would be that they deported to their home country. But if you commit a crime in the United States, obviously you're innocent until proven guilty. That's a found bedrock principle of American justice system. So you can't just
but again, they're not a citizen, right? So I struggle, at least for me, I struggle a little bit with this whole affording all of these rights to an individual that's not even a citizen of the country. Yeah, they've committed a crime. We've proven that they've committed a crime, but how does that automatically drop them into the criminal process, if you will?
Well, that's the whole point. Should people who come here illegally not have the same legal approach to them as a naturalized citizen or a native-born American? And that is where I think scholars have come down, or legal theorists, that yes, you are entitled to have the same legal process as any other American citizen.
Okay.
It could be done quickly. I mean, this is why the courts are a mess, because there are so many cases in the court system that drag on for years and years and years. And
exactly,
the truth of the matter is we're over regulated law, if you will, and we need to streamline what goes through the judicial system.
Yeah, I would agree. I was when I was prepping for the show, there's something like 64 injunctions already against President Trump for his various things. And they calculated at the current rate that he was going to breach like 350 injunctions by the end of his 4-year term. And then he's got well over 400 if you combined his first term and this term. That to me, something's amiss here, right?
Well, I think this is why the district judges are now trying to make precedents for the whole country, and that's not what a district judge is supposed to do, from my understanding of the legal system in the United States. A district judge decides on cases before him that pertain to only his district. And then you go to the appellate division, and then you go to the Supreme Court.
So again, they're not national. Yeah,
I mean, this is the strengths and I think weaknesses of our federal system, is that we should have things adjudicated at the local level and at the national level. And remember, in the old days, the Supreme Court used to issue opinions, and it would be up to the Congress to make laws and the courts to basically not overrule them per se, but the courts have decided over a long period of time, beginning in the early 1800s, that their opinion is the force of law. And that, I think, is another debate worth having. Is Supreme Court opinion the law, or does the people in Congress say, okay, 9 people in the Supreme Court have ruled that this is unconstitutional, so let's look at it again. And this is where the democratic process comes in. And this is where the people have to say, yeah, we want this law, we don't want this law. And again, democracy is a pretty messy process. And from my perspective, is that it should be about individual rights. It should be about property rights. It should be about civil liberties and all the things that we're entitled to as Americans, that the courts should be upholding it. But we know historically, the courts have denied people's individual rights and property rights through a whole slew of decisions. It made Obamacare constitutional. It made Social Security constitutional when there's no authority in the Constitution for health care and retirement benefits. So the courts
Exactly.
have basically rubber stamped what the Congress has done and the president signed of laws that have no basis in the Constitution. That's why I wrote that piece for the Mises Institute toward financial independence and a constitutional federal budget, because according to Article 1 and Section 8, virtually all the federal spending is unconstitutional. It's not authorized by the Constitution. And so what we've
Right.
had is an expansion of this gigantic welfare state and the military industrial complex, which Eisenhower warned us about in his farewell address in January 1961.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then so that brings up the whole question that I have is the Article 3, Section 1 of the Constitution, which the whole federal system is at the will of Congress. Congress defines it. Congress can undefine it.
Mm-hmm.
And so my problem is their lack of, which goes into another topic on what Doge is doing right now, is fighting all of this corruption and everything, is the lack of oversight, the lack of Congress actually doing their job, right?
Oh, there's no question about it. I mean, the thing that I've seen in my lifetime is we've gone from a fairly minimal government after World War II, when we
Right.
arrived in America, when I was a toddler, to this gigantic leviathan that
Yep.
spends more than $7 trillion a year, a mind-boggling number, with accumulated deficits of nearly $37 trillion, running $2 trillion deficits every year now. And Doge, I think, is a good first step. First, you expose the problem of the
Right.
waste, fraud, and abuse. What I'm trying to do with being with you and other interviews is expose the unconstitutional nature of our federal budget, because no one is talking about it. I mean, there was a great letter in the Wall Street Journal the other day that James Madison would disapprove of the Department of Education because it's not authorized. Well, you look at the Constitution, there's no authorization, like I said, for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare,
No, there's
housing.
not.
I mean, the list goes
No.
on. Corporate welfare. I mean, the list goes on and on. Foreign aid. I mean,
All
it's
of
just,
it. You're
it's just
absolutely right.
amazing how big the government has gotten, and the courts are supposed to protect the American people from an intrusive government. That's why we have the Bill of Rights. And yet
Right.
we got the 16th Amendment, which allows the federal government to tax us, but there is no constraint on that ability to tax, because once upon a time, the tax rate for the highest income earners hit nearly 100%. It was 94% during World War II. I would submit that's almost slavery. But yet the American people, when you add up all the taxes that they're paying, they're half free and half enslaved, because some people are paying
Absolutely.
50% of their income in taxes. Even if you're paying 40%, that is a lot of money to go to federal, state, and local governments. And the question that the American people should ask, and this is, no one's asking this question. Here are the taxes we pay. And the issue is, what value are we getting for those taxes?
Right.
And the answer is, we don't know, because in order to determine what value is, you must have a free market. Government is not a free market, coercive institution. And so that is the issue I want to bring before the American people, saying, let's have this civil debate about what the government should be doing according to the Constitution, because that is the supreme law of the land. That's what members of Congress have sworn to uphold. That's what the president, members of the Supreme Court, and his cabinet have sworn to uphold. And I'm taking this as a nonpartisan issue. Both parties have been turning their back on the Constitution. That's why we're in the financial mess that we're in.
Well, absolutely. And I think the part and parcel of all of that, Dr. Sabrin, is the simple fact of, and they're starting to look at it now, is how you have somebody that makes $150,000 a year being a senator or a representative, and 3-4 years later they're worth $25 to $100 million because they've been funneling all of this money through their slush funds and back into their pockets. And I think that's part of it. I don't think, and there is no oversight, and you're absolutely right. It is not a Republican or Democrat problem. It's all of them, just about all of them. Maybe there's one or two that are playing it the way it's supposed to be done, but I don't see it. And they wouldn't be screaming like mashed cats over Doge if they didn't have some kind of vested interest in the outcome of the thing. It's like the Epstein files, right? That they don't want released because nobody wants to see their name flying over to the little island, right?
Well, this is why we need term limits desperately. There was a
Oh yeah,
wonderful book published more than 30 years ago by economist James Payne, The Culture of Spending. And he did a statistical analysis of members of Congress. And no matter what party you belong to, the longer you're in Congress, the more spending you vote for. And so there is basically this incredible contradiction that they are the guardians of the American people's tax dollars. It's a myth. Members of
right.
Congress are beholden to the donor class. That's the
Yep.
evidence that we have. If you're a big donor, Donald Trump himself said this when he was a private citizen. He would donate to Republicans and Democrats, and when he called, they all took his calls. Why? Because he was a donor to his he was a
Who-
donor to Chuck Schumer when Chuck Schumer ran for the assembly back
Absolutely.
in the early 1980s, I think, or I think
Right.
maybe even the C's. So he's known Chuck Schumer for a long time, and this is the corruption that we have in Washington. It's about money and power, and you can throw in a little sex also, and you got money, power, and sex. And I don't know in what order it's important to members of
Yeah,
Congress,
absolutely.
but
Well,
the
go
point
ahead.
is the point is that Washington has become a money laundering operation. It takes money from
Absolutely.
the people. It sloshes around the different cabinet departments and agencies.
Agencies.
Then,
Yep.
and then the crumbs go back to the people, and we're supposed to be satisfied with the quote federal aid that they give us. If we kept our own money, we'd be much better off. That's why I wrote Tax Free 2000, my first book that was published in 1995, that talks about how we literally could have a tax-free America by funding everything we need voluntarily, just as we buy things voluntarily, whether it's a computer,
Sure.
self-service, internet.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is the beauty of free enterprise, is that you get what you want, and you can get it today virtually overnight with Amazon and the other online
Right.
e-commerce outfits. Is that it's amazing. In the old days, which you probably remember with me, if you wanted to buy something that you saw on TV, you had to dial an 800 number, and maybe in a week to 10 days or 2 weeks, you get it. Now you can go online, order Amazon something tonight, and you get it tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon, which shows you logistically, technologically, we are incredibly efficient in getting goods that people want to them. You can buy a car online. I sold my car online to Carvana because when I retired 5 years ago, I said, why do we need two cars? I'm not going to work anymore. So I went online, I told them what I have, and they came, picked up the car, gave me a check, and boom, I was done. So the
Right.
beauty of free enterprise is that it makes the voluntary exchange very seamless. And here's another phenomenon that is really amazing, and most people don't even think about it. You can call anybody in the world today for free on WhatsApp.
Yep.
Think about that. Years ago, it probably cost you an arm and a leg to call somebody in China or Indonesia or in Africa. Today, you can call them for free. As long as they're on WhatsApp and you're on WhatsApp, you can call people at no cost to you. And this is the amazing thing about technology. And of course, governments want to get their mitts on it as much as possible because they want to collect as much information on us as possible, because
Sure.
that's the downside of technology, is that government now has
Well-
another tool to monitor us.
They already have it. I mean, they've been monitoring it probably 2 days after Bell created it. They've been monitoring, the conversations back and forth. So that's almost a given. That's kind of like whatever you put on the internet is going to live there forever, right?
Yep.
I recently read the book, the Jekyll Island book about the Fed, and I was curious, based on our conversation, your thoughts on the Fed, because to me, it shouldn't exist.
Of course.
And it was put in place to support what we've been talking about.
Yeah, the Federal Reserve was created 1913, 6 years after the Panic of 1907. The bankers got together. They had their secret meeting in Jekyll Island.
Yeah.
Off the coast of Georgia, not far from you, I guess.
No, I've been there actually. Yeah.
And they put together the blueprint. Remember, this was the part of the progressive era.
Yep. Wilson's
boom in economic regulation and government control of the economy.
Right.
And it basically created a cartel that its mission was threefold when it was created. One is to be a lender of last resort, smooth out the business cycle, and maintain the purchasing power of the dollar. Well, it certainly has been the lender of last resort as it's shoveled money in during financial crisis that they create by printing money and manipulating interest rates.
Right.
They haven't smoothed out the business cycle because in 1929, the Great Depression began, and Herbert Hoover and FDR did everything wrong, and they perpetuated an economic downturn to create the excesses of the 1920s, the stock market bubble, the real estate bubble, and it lasted more than a full decade. The dollar has lost more than 95% of its purchasing power since 1913, when the Federal Reserve Act was signed by President Wilson and went into operation in 1914. So the Fed has been a huge failure in terms of making sure that we don't have, well, they create the business cycle, which I wrote in my book, Why the Federal Reserve Sucks, and my other book, Navigating the Boom Bust Cycle. So before the Fed was created, the bankers had fractional reserve banking, which meant they don't have all the money in reserve that they say they do. And when people were nervous about the financial viability of a bank, they went into the bank to try to get their gold and silver out. And lo and behold, the bank didn't have all of it. And so
exactly.
You had bank runs. So you had the Panic of 1819, Panic of 1837, 1857, 73, 1893. And then 1907. So the banker said, okay, we got to have a central bank like the Europeans do, because we were the last, I think, Western nation to get a central bank, and it's caused nothing but havoc. But here's the point I've been making for the past several years, Dave, and this is something that we should really appreciate. Despite the intervention by the Federal Reserve, but despite the taxes, the regulation, we have an incredibly high living standard in America, as long as you have a profession or you have a skill that you can
sell,
use in the marketplace.
Right.
And so with all the things thrown at the entrepreneurial class, the men and women who run companies, whether big public companies or medium-sized companies or mom and pop shops, they do an incredible job of getting goods to us and provide us with services. And so again, having this long perspective from the 90s, when I grew up in New York City, to where we are today, it's just amazing how better automobiles are. I mean, all the things that you have in an automobile today with GPS and better brakes and better gas mileage and more safety features and all that. Automobiles are head and shoulders above the cars from the 50s and 60s. Now we have internet. You can speak to people anywhere. You can get content that you have to spend hours in a library to get. When I was doing my dissertation in the 1970s at Rutgers, I mean, it's just amazing what we have today in terms of diagnostic equipment, in terms of CAT scans and MRIs. I mean, the list goes on and on. Laser surgery for your eyes. I mean, it's unbelievable what improvements have been made in every field under the sun. And so we have to be thankful that we live in America with all these conveniences. You go into a supermarket, Dave, people don't realize what it takes to get everything from the farm or the or other places to the wholesaler, to the supermarket. And we shop at Publix, which I'm sure you have in your neck of the woods.
Yep.
And it's just amazing the variety of foods that you have in Publix. That has to come, the supply chain has to be enormous for that to happen. The trucks, the railroads, the airplanes.
Exactly.
And this is the beauty of the free enterprise system, which I've been promoting in my writing, in my talks, in my interviews, because it just makes life so much more comfortable. I mean, we don't even think about not having clean water out of the faucet. In some parts of the world, clean water is a luxury. Clean water in our society is basically so mundane that people don't even think twice about it.
Exactly. So given the discussion, what are your views on Trump trying to? Well, obviously he's got all the tariffs out there, but you know there's been some rumblings about moving to a flat tax, which I'm all in favor of. There's been, you know, he made campaign promises about removing tax on Social Security, which I'm all in favor of. Removing tax on overtime, removing, you know, tax on tips.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on a lot of that? Because personally, I hope he gets that agenda, you know, codified, but we'll have to wait and see.
I'm giving a talk to my neighbors on the 17th of April, 2 days after tax day, the 15th. I'm going to talk about the different taxes different tax approaches that could replace the progressive income tax, which to me is one of the worst taxes there is. In fact, it's one of the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto. People don't even know that.
Exactly.
And so the point I've made in my writings about taxation, that the tax issue is really a spending issue. So if you're spending $7 trillion a year, as the federal government does, it
Right.
doesn't raise $7 trillion a year. So the American people think it's a free ride for the government to spend $7 trillion, but the government only collects $5 trillion in taxes, and the rest of it is borrowed. So that's not a way that the founders envisioned for the United States. At least most of them didn't. I mean, certainly Jefferson didn't. He called
No.
swindling of future generations, and of course present generations, to have to pay interest on the debt. So Jefferson was a very strong fiscal conservative, as were other presidents in the first few decades of the Republic. And in the 20th century, Calvin Coolidge, which I quote in my essay at the Mises Institute, he really, in one of his addresses, I forget if it was an inaugural address, he said, the federal government has gone beyond the legitimate business that it's entitled to be in, which is Article 1, Section 8. So
Right.
the tax issue is really a spending issue. So let's look at the different taxes. The progressive income tax is incredibly complicated. In fact, if you go online, I found this one website that had the original tax return of 1914, and it was 4 pages long. To complete your taxes today, if you don't take a standard deduction, there's a booklet that's more than 100 pages long to do your taxes. Now,
Right.
the interesting thing that I found out in doing the research for this presentation is that most Americans just file a short 1040 because of the high standard deduction. So they don't have to itemize their taxes. They can basically do it on 1 page or 2 pages, and that's it. But if you have a more complicated tax return, I mean, my tax returns are getting pretty complicated because of all the things that I'm doing and all the
Right.
different types of investments that I have. But I need a professional accountant in order to do that because it's just incredibly complicated. So having said that, you can go to a flat tax, 10, 12, 14%. But
Yeah.
then we have Social Security and Medicare taxes as well. But the point is, we've got to streamline the taxes. We've got to streamline the federal government. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing in writing and doing interviews, is that we really need to address the spending issue. And
Right.
if the spending issue is addressed, then the tax issue falls in place. I mean, the point that I make in this article that I wrote, which is a condensed version of a much longer article that'll be published in the book that my longtime accounting professor friend Robert McGee is editing, called The Ethics and Philosophy of Taxation. And in that, I point out how we can have no more income taxes. We could have a transition to people funding their own retirement, so you won't need Social Security or Medicare,
Right.
by accumulating money through your lifetime. And then you have a bundle of money that you could use for your retirement income and pay your medical bills. And that takes a real cultural shift in America, because most people think Medicare and Social Security sort of came down on the third tablet that Moses brought down from the mountain,
Right.
that's ordained by the Lord. And I make the point that there's no constitutional basis for these programs, and we would be much better off, especially young people, if they would save for their own retirement, use their Social Security money and Medicare tax dollars and put it away and compound it over 40, 50 years, and they would have much more than what Social Security and Medicare is promising them.
Yeah, I read a study, and it's been a while ago, that if you and I can't remember the dates of this, so the numbers are probably skewed, but it was basically, if you put $2,500 or $3,000 in an account at the birth of your child,
Yeah.
that and you would, and you know, that money would be that child's at retirement. It would be some phenomenal number. And the same for, say, the child was female and the male that she ends up marrying did the same thing. There wouldn't be a penalty. They'd both have all of that money in combination to do with however they wanted to do with it. And the statement was, if the federal government gave, you know, if my wife had a daughter, they gave me $3,500 right then and there, with the sole purpose of investing it in this vehicle, this financial vehicle, then that would be it. It would be done. And basically what the article said, and I can't remember the author of it, Dr. Sabrin, but it was billions of dollars saved just by doing that one simple thing.
Yeah, I did an exercise with my students in my corporate finance class where when we did the time value of money, and there was a table that I had of putting money away at birth and then doing it for 18 years and then doing it again when you start working or at 21, you
Sure.
would have multi-millions of dollars in a retirement account. And if
Exactly.
it accumulated tax-free and was withdrawn tax-free, you wouldn't need any of these government programs because
Right.
everyone would be financially independent, which is what the theme of my hat is:
Right.
make Americans financially independent.
Independent.
And the way you
Exactly.
do that is you save, and that money compounds over 40, 50, 60 years,
Right.
and you 70 years even from the time of birth, because we know people are going to be living longer as long as they have healthy lifestyles. So that's the whole Maha movement: make America healthy again.
Right.
This is not rocket science. This is about a
No.
simple concept called compound interest. And
Yeah.
if you do that over a long period of time, I mean, Warren Buffett said one of the great benefits of human civilization is compound interest,
Yeah.
because that's how you accumulate wealth over a long period of time without lifting anything. All you have to do is buy an S&P 500 index fund, which has returned 9% a year over the last 100 years, through the ups and downs of the economy. So it just shows you, if we had a much better economy where we wouldn't have so many ups and downs, even if you made 6%, but 6% would be all real, there would be no inflation. That's where we should be headed. We should be headed for either no increase in inflation, or in a real free market, you would have slight deflation where prices would go down 1-2% a year. And that's the beauty of a free enterprise system. Prices go down every year as there's more productivity, and you have a sound
Yep.
monetary system. So
Yeah.
again, this is all discussed in Sound Economics at the Mises Institute. The Austrian School has been writing about this for literally more than 100 years.
Right.
And it's something that we need to embrace as a people, as a culture.
Yep.
And it starts with the family. It starts with parents knowing these principles, and then it should be taught in the public schools.
I was
I
just going to
remember in
say,
elementary school, I didn't have money because we didn't have much money as in the 1950s, but kids would bring in $1 or $2 every week, and it would go into a savings account for them, that the local bank would have a program for
Yep.
students.
Yep.
And I didn't have the $1 or $2. But that important lesson was you save. And so when I was teaching at Ramapo College for 35 years, I put away the maximum I could in my 401k. The college put some money in also, and I had a big chunk of money when I retired 5 years ago.
Right. Yeah, but unfortunately, I can see two problems here. Problem number one is the social shift for people actually taking responsibility for their own welfare, because that accountability right now is everybody wants somebody else to take care of their butt. And number two, it takes complete control away from these quasi-social Marxist politicians, and it puts the government back into the government to coin and protect the country, as opposed to a laundry list of agencies and stuff. So you have to overcome, at least in my mind, you have to overcome at least those two obstacles.
There's no question about it. I mean, we're so embedded in the welfare state in America.
Yeah.
Even Republicans, see, they lose the argument once they say you have to have a social safety net. Once you say that, then you're saying the government's got to be in the driver's seat of helping people. And I reject that, because we have so many great nonprofit organizations in the country that don't take a penny of the government money, which is taxpayer money. And here in Naples, Florida, we have the Neighborhood Health Clinic, which has been around 25 years. They don't take a penny of government money, and they're doing incredible work of helping people on the low income ladder get health care, medical care. You have Habitat for Humanity. You have food banks. Everything the government does, we have in the nonprofit sector. So what I'm saying is, let's cut taxes as quickly as possible, and then people can make the case to their
and support those
say,
other.
Look at the great work we're doing without any taxpayer dollars, and we're helping people become financially independent. Whether it's with housing, helping people build houses. Habitat for Humanity can also do multifamily housing as well, as long as someone donates land to them, which is a big cost in a lot of communities. And you have builders and people working on multifamily housing. So in other words, everything the government does can be done in the private sector or the nonprofit sector. And that is an educational process that has to take place by people like me, and do this all over the country, and make the politicians realize that The world doesn't revolve around Washington D.C.
No, they have to be like, man, they need to be working themselves out of a job
Yep.
instead of building bigger and better milk stools. And it's funny you brought that up because San Antonio has basically fixed their homeless problem by creating a campus that they went into a partnership with private companies and then government agencies and stuff where they offer medical, educational, counseling,
Mhm.
place to sleep, a place to, and the whole concept of the place has been so remarkably successful where you actually come in the door and you work through their process and you come out the other door where you can function and go back into the work stream
Mhm.
and Tunnel to Towers is doing the same thing for
Yep.
veterans,
Yep.
right? And that's not funded by the government. That's all privately funded kinds of things where people are actually picking up the mantle and helping. So you're absolutely right. There's opportunity here to shift the whole paradigm. I'm just afraid that people have been on the dole, so to speak, so long with the thought that government was here to help you that it's going to be really hard to overcome that.
Well, this is why Trump has the
Right.
bully pulpit to educate the American people about
Yeah.
this. And
Yeah.
I wish I had an opportunity to sit down with him and have him read Peter Drucker's 1991 Wall Street Journal article entitled "It Profits Us to Strengthen Nonprofits." I've been quoting from that article since I first read it in December 1991. I put it in some of my Substack articles at murraysabrin.substack.com. And what Drucker advocates in this article is that we should get rid of government social services and get rid of the welfare state and have the nonprofit sector take over the
Absolutely.
whole shebang. And
Churches
yep,
and
these were called the mutual aid societies before the Great Depression.
right,
They did life insurance, they did unemployment, they did medical care, they
right,
did everything that the government now purports to do in the name of compassion. But yet, is people getting together in the local community? Either they were connected by your religion, by ethnicity, by nationality.
yeah,
And this is the beauty of America. If people talk about the tapestry of America, that was it, with
right,
ethnic groups and religious groups
right,
working in their own communities to help people in need.
yeah. So where can people find your information, Dr.
It's at
Sabrin?
murraysabrin.substack.com. I just posted a piece today about Trump and his tariffs and other issues. I'll be posting probably tomorrow or Saturday. I like to get at least 2, 3 posts out a week because this is very important for the future of the country. This is about young people. This is not about we
Right.
aging baby boomers. Trump and I are the same age with Bill Clinton and
Yep.
George W. Bush. And the first wave of the baby boomers, I think, have a responsibility to the rest of the country to say, listen, we've tried the welfare state approach for 100 years. It's now time that we try the free enterprise nonprofit approach, because that's going to create more wealth and give us
Yep.
greater social services at the local level without begging Washington for money.
Exactly. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. We've been speaking with Dr. Murray Sabrin, who has recently published his memoirs, which is very, very interesting, called From an Immigrant to Public Intellectual, An American Story. And the conversation has been great, Doctor. I can't thank you enough. It's been enlightening, and I hope the audience has gotten a little bit more enthused about the direction a lot of this can go.
Well, thank you, Dave. It's a real pleasure being with you, because I've been at this a long time. And since I retired 5 years ago, I've been writing, speaking, and people are receptive. Once you present a common sense argument and you have the historical facts and
Right.
you have the theoretical foundation and the common sense approach, people will say, yeah, that's a good idea. Why don't we do it? But as you know, people are busy in their own lives, and it's up to
Yeah.
the opinion makers in the country to move the country forward. And the public officials, they have the big megaphone, whether it's on legacy media or anything like
Yeah.
that. And so I
True.
wish I could have that opportunity as well.
Well, I just as soon go at it the way I'm going at it, which is incrementally, little bit at a time,
Sure.
because I don't want to give away what they would expect from me relative to my content or anything else. I value that too much to have to make those kind of deals. I just as soon stay little and work through what I need to work through. So everybody needs to understand that make America financially independent is the mantra of the day, right?
Absolutely.
They need to be chanting it. So once again, it's been an absolute pleasure, sir, and hopefully we can have you back on in the not too distant future.
I love it, David. Dave, thanks so much.
You bet.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to listen to more Clarity from Chaos shows on demand, go to clarityfromchaos.buzzsprout.com or send Dave an email at info@clarityfromchaos.com for information on previous shows. You can also listen to the show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Twitter, or Google Podcast. Until next time, please remember, it's not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. Be well, everyone.